Chapter 9. It's about reducing your project duration. In some situation, you'll be asked as a project manager, trying to reduce the time to market for your new product or service, so your company can compete with its competitors for the first mover advantage. Sometimes also because of weather, uncontrollable the factors that delay your project, so you try to accelerate the projects. And sometimes just could be if you do it earlier and deliver faster, you sometimes get incentive in the contract. Or there could be some deadline that you have to do, or resource that someone need to do it to work on another project, so you have to accelerate. But one thing you have to remember is time is a money. There's always a trade-off between how much time you want to reduce, because every time you try to reduce the duration of your project by involving more resources, it's going to increase your project cost. So the question you have to ask yourself as a project manager is, how much additional cost will incur in relation to how much time you'll be able to reduce? And it often depends on how much resource you have. Sometimes your resource is a constraint, so you won't be provided with additional budget to reduce your project duration. In that case, you probably have to think about reduce your project scope or compromise quality. Or look into your critical path and see if there's any activity that could be removed. But in these chapters, what you're trying to learn is when the resources are not constrained. So you can add more resources in order to reduce the project duration. You can also schedule overtime by hiring more people or work double load by paying them extra hours. Or you try to hire more than one person to do the same jobs. But again, when you're dealing with the issue that resources are not constraints, still the resource that costs money. So the question is how much additional resource you would like to incur in order to optimize the use of your resource. So to optimize your decision of reducing project duration without incurring too much additional cost, you first have to understand the cost itself has different kinds. When you are trying to reduce project duration, you will involve both direct and indirect costs. When the time is reduced, means the project doesn't have to take longer to finish. That means you don't have to hire more administrators or supervisors to supervise the projects. So the longer you can reduce your project duration, you can reduce the project indirect cost. But project direct cost, the cost that actually go into the project, like labor, material, equipment, subcontractor, when you try to involve more of them, more direct costs into the process of reducing your project duration, actually that increases the direct cost. So your question activity will increase the direct cost, at the same time reduce your indirect cost. So again, time is money. When you try to reduce your project duration, you are increasing your project cost. And the cost again involves the direct and indirect cost. So it's recommended you follow this three process in order to help you optimize how much additional resource that you like to involve in order to reduce your project duration. The first step is try to gather all the information about your direct and indirect costs of specific project duration. The second, go into your critical path activity and looking for the lowest, the direct cost activity to shorten project duration. It could cost less. And it thinks that it's on the critical path. So whenever you be able to reduce the duration, and even by 1 day, you reduce 1 day for your entire total project duration. And as we discussed, the direct cost will be increased At the same time, indirect cost will be reduced when you try to reduce your project duration. So it's important to compute the total cost for any specific duration and understand the benefit, the incremental benefit of reducing project time. Let me give you some examples. So that let's look at the chart. You can look at the matrix, the x-axis. It's the time you can reduce. So originally the project would be scheduled to finish on the 14th day, but they try to reduce to the 10th days. So they try to crash the project by 4 days. On the y-axis is the cost that will incur. So if you look at the case when you try to reduce your project duration, total project duration from 14 days to 10 days, you can look at the indirect cost. It's going to be the decrease incrementally, because then you don't have to hire more administrators for more days. At the same time, since you involve more resources, there could be more people to hire, more equipment to use, or more contractor to hire. The direct cost will be increased. So you can see, whenever you try to crash your project duration, your direct cost will be increased, but your indirect cost will be the decrease. So you look at the cost on the 14th day. When you try to reduce, by the time you reach the 10th day, you actually save more money than you spend. But as soon as you pass the 10 days, your total cost actually is increased. So what's the decision to make in terms of the number of days to reduce? There'll be 14 days, because after the 4 days, because after the 4 days, it's going to cost you more to have direct costs than how much you can save from the indirect cost. And that's the optimum, the cost time point. As a good project manager, you have to try to reach. So let me repeat one more time about the steps you have to go through in order to construct a project cost duration graph. 1, you want to find the total direct cost for selected project duration. Second, you have to find the total indirect cost. And then you sum up the direct and indirect cost for this selected project duration. And see if you have more cost than benefit or vice versa. And that will help you make a decision when is the optimum, the project cost duration point. Before I show you an actual example, you have to learn about the assumption to be used when constructing a project cost duration graph. The first assumption is you are looking for activity on a critical path with the smallest increase in cost per unit of time, meaning it costs less to reduce the same number of days. Those are activities you want to look for first. Other assumptions include the cost and time relationship is linear, and crash time represents a limit, the greatest time reduction possible under realistic conditions. You are looking for slope. It's a constant cost per unit of time of reduction. So you're looking for the smallest one to be reduced first. Look at this as example. When you try to reduce from 10 days to 5 days for the projects, your cost increase from 400 to 800. So it will cost you $400 more to reduce 5 days. So if you subtract 5 days from 400, that means 800 divided by 5. So we are talking about $80 per unit of activity duration. So that's your slope and also your cost per unit of duration reduction. Let's look at this table. Here you have different slope for different work breakdown structure tests for different activities. When the slope is lower, meaning it costs less to reduce the time. Here, the second column is about the maximum crash time. All activities still need some time to finish. It doesn't matter how much resource you involve. So you want to know how much you can crash. Some project, even though you try to crash earlier, but there's some limitation. Example could be, for instance, you put on the cement, right? So it doesn't matter how many people you involve, but it's more about the time you have to wait before it gets dry, before you can put a tile on top of the cement. So that's what I mean by maximum crash time. It varies with different activities. That's why you've been seeing the different maximum crash time for different activities. Here, you're looking at the direct cost. Here's how much it will be costing you to do the project without crashing your projects. But then you also want to figure out how much additional cost would be for different activity, depending on both the slope and maximum the crash time. So let's look at the activity A. During the normal project duration, it takes about 3 days to finish the activity A. But since you can reduce as many as 1 day, but it costs you $20 additional to crash the activity by 1 day. So instead of finish normal time 3 days for activity A, now you can finish by 2 because you reduce 1 day, the maximum crash time. But instead of spending $50, the direct cost now to finish activity A will be $70. Let's look at one more example. Here, the maximum crash time is 2 days for activity B. But slope, each time you crash 1 day for activity B, it costs you $40 addition. So let's look at the normal time that you need to complete activity B. It will be 6 days and cost you $80. But again, look, you can reduce by 2 days, right? But each day costs you additional $40. So we are talking about if I spend $80 more. Instead of finishing 6 days, now I can finish 4 days. So instead of spending $80, the direct cost, now you're spending $160 to finish the activity B. Let's look at the activity D. It costs additional $25 to reduce 1 day, but you can reduce the maximum of 4 days. Now normal day you need will be 11 days to finish activity D, costs you $50. But since now I can reduce 4 days, right? So 11 subtract 4, there'll be 7, but it's not free, right? So it's 25 multiplied by 4, we're talking about additional $100. So you're now the direct cost to complete activity D will be $150. But instead of finishing 11 days, now you are utilizing the maximum crash time. So now you can finish the activity, the D, in 7 days. So when you decide what activity to crash first, you are looking for the smallest slope. Means it costs less to redo it. So I think the next job is to have your network diagram. Now the total number of days you would need, normal time will be 25 days. This is a critical path because when you add them up, 11, 20 to 25 days, longer than everyone else. So critical path is the longest day. So A, D, E, F, G is the critical path. And out of the critical path, you are looking for activity that costs less to reduce. So A, D, F, G, A, D, F, G, G is the finish. So A, D, F, 30, 25, 20. So it looks like A is the activity have to be the crash first. So I am going to reduce the total project duration from 25 days to 24 days by reducing the 1 day for activity A. So 2x. So instead of finishing 25, now you finish 24. Instead of spending $450, now you have to spend $470 because it costs additional $20. Okay, so repeat the same process. Now you have ADFG still as a critical path, going back to ADFG. So it looks like D costs less since you already maximize the question time A, so the next thing will be the D. Right, so you reduce 1 day at a time, so instead of finishing 11, I'm finishing the 10. So instead of the total project duration 24 days, now it's 23 days. But instead of spending, you are spending $25 extras because that's the slope you have. So 470 plus 25 for 95. Get it? But when you are doing this, as you can tell, now all of a sudden you have different critical paths, right? And sometimes you have even more critical paths. But rule of thumb is the same. Going through all the critical paths and looking for the activity with a small slope, meaning it costs less to reduce the total project duration. And from there, gradually, you will be able to reduce your total project duration by crashing different activity. But the question is, when is the time you have to stop crashing your projects? When is the optimum, the direct indirect costs? So the example I have been able to show you are all the direct costs, but you also have to make the assumption about your indirect cost. So as you can tell, they have $50 incremental whenever you reduce a project duration by 1 day, meaning it costs you about $50 less to hire supervisors, administrators, or whatever considers the indirect cost by $50 whenever you reduce it by 1 day. You add your direct cost with your indirect cost, that will give you a total cost. So as you can tell, it's costing you less than you save. And that's why when you are reducing your project duration from 25 days to 22 days, actually you are gradually saving your money by delivering your project earlier. But as soon as you go over 22 days, the total project cost is increased. The reason is, now it's going to cost you more in the direct cost than the money you'll be able to save in the indirect cost. So whenever you reach the minimum total cost, that's the optimum point you have to stop, because it doesn't make sense to reduce your project, to crash your project duration any longer when your total cost is increased substantially. Let's look at the project cost duration graph based on the table. From 25 days to 22 days, your total indirect cost decreased by $50 each time you reduce 1 day, but your total direct cost gradually increased. After 22nd day, $775 for your total project cost. After you reduce by 3 days, the cost start increasing. So that's the time you have to say, that's enough. Let's not reduce the project duration anymore. This is how much we can do in order to optimize our project cost and duration at the same time. So I hope now you know, as a good project managers, you have to be constantly looking for the increase in your total direct cost and the decrease of your total indirect cost when you have to make a question decision. Once you'll be able to do that, the next thing you have to think about is, sometimes it's not about the time, it's about the cost. You were told that this is how much money you have, and your job is try to reduce the project cost as much as possible. So in that case, when time is not an issue but the cost, then you have to start thinking about other alternatives, like reducing your project scope, having the same person taking more responsibility, outsource your project activity or even the entire project to someone else by bargaining down the price, or brainstorm some cost-saving option with your stakeholder and team members. So now, by the end of this chapter, you should be able to understand how to reduce a project duration if you have a resource constraints, and also when you have to deal with the project cost constraint rather than the time constraint, and what kind of alternative also available for you to do. Okay, let me know if you have a question. Otherwise, I hope you enjoy studying chapter 9, reducing project duration. It's an important chapter. And try to use the instruction I provided and understanding how to optimize your project cost and reduction. That will give you enough information to complete your exercise 9 and assignment 9. So email me if you have questions. Otherwise, enjoy studying chapter 9 by yourself and also with your team members.